All right, everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at AI governance.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it is, right? I feel like it's something we hear all the time,
Yeah.
AI governance this, AI governance that. But I think it can be kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Absolutely.
So you sent me some really cool research and articles about it, and I think we can unpack some of that today and help our listeners kind of understand, like, what are the key things
Definitely.
to think about when we talk about AI governance?
Yeah.
Like, what even is this wild west of AI that we hear about all the time?
Right?
And, like, why should I care about data governance
Yeah.
if I'm, like, not a data scientist or, you know, some kind of tech person?
Right.
So maybe we can start with one of the first articles you sent me,
Yeah.
which was from Gender, and it was about
Yeah.
data governance, which is like a term I feel like I hear all the time, but
Right.
maybe don't fully understand.
Totally.
Can you kind of like break it down for us?
Yeah. So what gender really focuses on in this article is that data governance is really the foundation
Oh,
of
man.
AI governance. So AI governance begins with solid data governance.
Okay.
And that's because AI, its intelligence, relies on the data that fuels it.
Right. Right.
So if you have bad data or sensitive data that you're not supposed to be using,
Okay.
then it's going to lead to like what we hear about AI hallucinations, which is where the AI just kind of makes things up or
Yeah.
reveals information that could lead to a data breach or, reputation damage to your company.
So like it's all about the quality of the data
It really is all about the quality of the
that
data.
you're putting into these systems.
Yeah, think of it like baking a cake.
Okay.
You put in rotten eggs.
Yeah.
Not going to be a good cake.
Makes sense.
So it's really like garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
You have to start with good data to get good results.
So what are some like real world consequences of using bad data in an AI?
Okay, so let's say you're a financial institution and you're using an AI system to assess loan applications.
Okay.
But the data that's used to train your AI system has historical biases against certain demographics.
Oh, wow.
So that, like, the AI
Yeah.
could unknowingly perpetuate these biases
Right.
and lead to unfair lending practices.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right.
And that's why data governance is so important in this context.
Yeah, it's not just like a technical thing. It actually has like real world consequences.
Yeah, and it goes even beyond those biases, like you were saying, like inaccurate data can lead to these AI hallucinations where the
Yeah.
AI generates outputs that are just like completely nonsensical.
Yeah.
Let's say a healthcare provider is using an AI system to analyze medical images,
Okay.
but the data that they use to train this AI is incomplete or corrupted.
Right.
The AI might misinterpret those images and lead to misdiagnoses
Oh, wow.
or even like incorrect treatment recommendations, which is a scary thought.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's a bad situation.
So, data governance, we've established that it's important. But once we have this good data,
Right.
what else do we need to think about when we're talking about governing these systems?
Yeah, so then we need to think about model discovery, and this is once you have your data sorted.
Okay.
Model discovery is essentially being aware of what specific AI models
Okay.
you're using and for what purpose.
So we know we have good data, but we also need to know like what
Yeah.
specific tool we're using.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Think of it like you're doing a home repair.
Okay.
You need to choose the right tool.
Right.
You wouldn't use a hammer
Yeah.
to screw in a light bulb.
Definitely not. Yeah.
So it's all about understanding what is being
That's
used
right.
and for what reason.
Okay, so like why is that so important? Like why do I need to know
Yeah.
what model is being used? Like what's the big deal?
So as AI becomes more and more popular and integrated into our lives, stakeholders, from customers
Yeah.
to regulators, are going to want to know, like, what's under the hood? How are these decisions being made?
Right.
And this is especially important as regulations
Yeah.
like the EU AI Act emerge.
Right. One of the articles you sent me mentions that
Yes.
act specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, so the EU AI Act, it categorizes AI systems based on their risk levels.
Okay.
And the higher risk your application, the more regulations you're going to have.
Right.
The stricter requirements you're going to have for transparency and all of that.
So it's not even just like a nice to have. It's
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
need to do
That's
this.
going to be a legal requirement in some cases.
Okay, so this is getting serious.
Yes, it is getting serious.
Okay, so so we have this good data, we know what model we're using, but then to get into
Yeah.
like the actual meat of what good AI governance looks like,
Yeah.
in the research that you sent me, Gender had these 5 pillars of AI governance.
Yes.
Can we kind of break down what each of those are?
Yeah, so the first one is transparency, which we already kind of talked about. So that's knowing which models you're using,
Right.
understanding how they work,
Okay.
how they reach their conclusions, and what data was used.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a black box.
Yeah, okay.
And this can be achieved using what's called explainable AI,
Oh, okay.
which focuses on AI systems that provide clear justifications for their decisions.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's more understandable to humans.
I like that.
Yeah.
So explainable AI, pillar number 1. What about number 2?
Pillar number 2 is ethical use,
Okay.
and that focuses on ensuring that AI systems are used in a way that aligns with ethical principles.
Okay.
So tackling things like bias
Right.
and making sure that it doesn't discriminate.
Okay.
For example, if a company is using an AI-powered recruitment tool,
Okay.
they need to make sure that this AI is not unfairly discriminating
Yeah.
against certain candidates.
Right. So making sure that AI is being used for good, not for evil.
Exactly. And then the third pillar is accountability. And this is as AI takes on more and more responsibility.
Yeah.
It's important to establish clear lines of accountability.
Right. So like if something goes wrong,
Yes.
we know who's responsible.
Exactly. So who is liable if an AI system makes a mistake?
Okay.
For example, let's say a self-driving car gets into an accident.
Right.
Who is accountable?
Right.
Is it the developer, the manufacturer,
Yeah.
the passenger?
It's a good question.
Yeah, these are all important questions
Yeah.
to consider.
Okay. So that's accountability. What about number 4?
Number 4 is compliance.
Okay.
And this means making sure that the AI systems follow the rules and regulations.
So not just doing the right thing, but
Right.
making sure you're following all the rules too.
Exactly, like data privacy regulations, for example.
Okay. So compliance. And then the last one, pillar number 5.
Pillar number 5 is risk management.
Okay.
And that focuses on identifying and mitigating any potential risks.
So being prepared,
Exactly.
like thinking ahead.
Yes. Thinking ahead, taking a proactive approach
Yeah.
to AI safety and security. So considering data breaches,
Yeah.
algorithmic bias, and any unintended consequences.
Right. Because sometimes you don't know
Right.
those.
Exactly. And so risk management is just having a plan in place
Okay.
to address these issues.
So it's really about thinking about all these different facets of what
Mm.
could go wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so those 5 pillars, I really like that framework. I think it's helpful to kind of break down like what responsible AI development looks like.
Exactly. It's a really good framework.
So we've talked about data governance, but
Yeah.
in one of the other pieces you sent me, Matter talks about this idea of the Wild West of AI.
Yes. That's a good one.
What does that even mean? Like,
Yeah.
help me understand that analogy.
Yeah. So what Matter's really talking about is that in a lot of companies, there's a lack of control and visibility
Okay.
when it comes to AI. So people are experimenting with AI in different departments, using different tools,
Yeah.
different data sets, and
Mhm.
oftentimes there aren't clear guidelines in place.
So it's like everyone's just kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's no one to kind of
Yeah, there's no sheriff in town.
wrangle it all in.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this can be really risky.
What kind of risks are we talking about here?
So if you don't know where AI is being used in your company,
Mm-hmm.
you can't effectively govern it.
Okay.
You might have different teams using different models
Yes.
that have conflicting assumptions
Right.
or even contradictory goals.
Yeah, so it's like having a bunch of chefs in a
Chef.
kitchen all making different dishes.
Yes. And you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it could be a mess.
And you don't know what you're going to get. It could be a disaster.
So then how do we like address that? How do we wrangle this Wild West?
Yeah. So what you can do is establish like a centralized AI governance function.
Okay.
So it could be a dedicated team or individual
Okay.
that's responsible for implementing these policies across the board.
So like a sheriff
Yeah, exactly. The sheriff comes in.
to kind of keep everyone in line.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that could be a big lift for like smaller organizations
Yeah.
that maybe don't have a ton of resources.
Right. And the good news is that AI governance doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition.
Okay.
You can implement it in stages,
Okay.
starting with the most critical areas
Right.
and then gradually expanding it.
So just start somewhere.
Start somewhere, take those first steps.
Okay, so we've talked about good data
Right.
and the importance of like model discovery, but in another one of the articles you sent, Roy had a really interesting point
Yes.
about the need for a strong engineering perspective when we're thinking about AI governance.
Yeah, he really emphasized the importance of defining the problem you're trying to solve with AI
Okay.
before you even think about data
Right.
or algorithms.
So before you get all technical,
Yeah, before you get into all
you
that.
need to think about like the big picture of
Yes.
what we're even trying to do.
Exactly. And like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What problem are we trying to solve?
Right, because you can end up creating a whole new set of
Everything.
problems.
You can create more problems.
If you're not careful.
And it's not just identifying the problem, it's also understanding the context in which the AI will be operating.
What do you mean by context?
So let's say a company's developing an AI system to personalize product recommendations.
Okay.
The context matters.
Right, so a recommendation engine for like a clothing store is going to be very different
Yes.
than one for a healthcare website.
Exactly. You have to think about things like user privacy, data security, and potential ethical implications.
Right, because like what might be an okay recommendation in one context
Right.
could be really bad in another.
Exactly.
So you need to think about all that stuff up front before you even get into the technical bits.
Before you write any code.
Okay, and I think Roy's point about diverse perspectives is really key here. It's not just the engineers who should be in the room when we're making these decisions, right?
Absolutely not.
Like, who else should we be talking to?
We should be talking to data scientists, product managers, legal experts,
Oh,
even end users.
yeah, that makes sense.
It has to be a collaborative effort.
Because if you just have a bunch of engineers, they might build something super cool
Right.
that is totally unusable
Exactly.
or like,
Unethical.
unethical.
Yeah. So it's important to get everyone's perspective.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of internal things that companies need to do.
Yeah.
But one of the articles you sent me also mentioned third-party risks, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is that?
So third-party risks are essentially, even if your organization has strong AI governance practices,
Okay.
you could still be exposed to risks if the vendors that you're working with
Okay.
don't have those same standards.
So it's like you're only as strong
Yep.
as your weakest link.
You're only as strong as your weakest link. Exactly.
Okay.
So let's say you're a bank
Yeah.
and you're using a third-party vendor for customer service chatbots.
Okay.
And that vendor might be using an AI model that's trained on data that has bias.
Right.
Even if your AI system internally is perfectly fine,
Yeah.
you're still going to be at risk.
Right, because you're using this other system.
Right.
Yeah, that's tricky.
It's very tricky, yeah.
So how do you even, like, know to ask these questions of your vendors?
Yeah, well, I think including AI governance requirements in your contracts
Okay.
with your vendors is a good place to start.
So making it really clear
Yeah.
up front what your expectations are.
Yeah, like what AI models are you using? What data are you using to train them?
Right.
How are you mitigating bias?
So it's really about having those conversations
Yeah.
early on.
Early on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, ongoing monitoring.
Okay.
You have to make sure that your vendors are actually adhering to those standards.
So trusting but verifying.
Exactly. Trusting but verifying.
Got it.
And this can involve things like document review, audits, or even running tests
Oh, interesting.
on the AI system itself.
Okay, so this is getting very complicated.
It can be very complicated.
It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about.
But it sounds like these third-party risks are something we really need to be paying attention to.
You really do, because AI is constantly evolving
Yeah.
and new risks emerge all the time, so you have to stay informed.
Wow, okay, so it's like a constant
Tremendous.
process of learning.
Yes.
Okay, so we've covered so much today, I feel like I have a much better understanding
Yeah.
of what AI governance is.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just take a second to kind of summarize what we've talked about.
Yeah, good idea.
So, number one, AI governance is a lot more than just data governance.
Right.
It's really about all these different things like transparency, ethics.
Accountability, compliance, risk management.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is.
And then, we talked about how data governance is so important because the quality of the data that you're putting in really affects
Affects the results.
the results.
Yeah.
And then we also talked about model discovery and like why it matters to know
Yes.
what model you're using.
Exactly. For what purpose?
Yeah.
Transparency is key.
And then we got into those 5 pillars, which I thought was really helpful.
Really good
We
framework.
kind of break down
Yeah.
all the things that we need to be thinking about.
Yes.
And then, of course, this idea of the Wild West,
The Wild West, yes.
which is a little bit scary.
It is a little scary.
But it sounds like there are things that organizations can do
There are, yes.
to kind of wrangle that.
Yes.
And then, of course, these third-party risks, which I think is something that we often forget about.
We do, yes.
So it's important.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I feel like we have a really good foundation
I think so, too.
for understanding AI governance.
Yes.
Now,
Good place to start.
yeah. It really is a lot to consider, isn't it?
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really interesting that Matter brings up is this idea of like really understanding like where the AI is being used within a company.
Right.
It's one thing to have these high-level policies in place, but like you need to actually know like the specifics of like, is it being used in marketing? Is it being used in finance? Like,
So it's not just like a company having like an AI ethics statement, up on their website. It's like
right, yeah.
actually knowing like where is this stuff happening?
Exactly. Yeah. You have to know like which teams are using which tools, what data are they using? Like, what are they actually using it for?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, it's kind of like you're just like trying to steer a ship, but you don't know where you are on the map. You don't know like
Sure, yeah.
what direction you're going in.
So it's like even if you have like this great AI governance team and you have these wonderful policies, if you don't know like
Right.
where the rubber meets the road,
Exactly.
then it's not going to be very effective.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. Can you give me like a specific example of like what could go wrong if you don't have this like granular level of
Sure.
understanding?
Yeah, let's say your marketing team is using an AI tool to personalize email campaigns.
Okay.
But, they don't realize that the data that is feeding into that tool contains sensitive customer information that should not be used for marketing purposes.
No, right.
So then you have a potential privacy violation.
That's a problem.
Yeah, and reputational damage.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And if you don't know where the AI is being used and what data it's accessing, it's really easy for those oversights to occur.
So it's really all about having like the systems and processes in place to like keep track of this stuff.
Yeah, it's not just about the intentions. It's like, how are you actually going to implement this?
Yeah.
How are you going to monitor this stuff?
So this kind of connects back to like the model discovery that we were talking about.
Yeah.
It's like you not only need to know what model you have,
Right.
but you need to know where it's being used.
Yeah, where it's being used and for what purpose.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
And I imagine this becomes even more important when you start talking about like third-party risks and vendors.
Absolutely.
Because it's one thing if it's your own company, but if you're sharing data with other people
Yeah.
and you don't even know what
Yeah.
they're doing with it, that can be really scary.
Right, because even if you have like great data security practices in place,
Yeah.
if you're sharing that data with a company that doesn't,
Yeah.
you're vulnerable.
It's like having a really secure house,
Yeah.
but then you just like give your key to a random person.
Right, exactly.
Like that's not very helpful.
It defeats the purpose.
Okay, so we're working with all these vendors, we're sharing all this data. Like, how do we even know what questions to ask them?
Right. So you want to ask them things like, what AI models are you using? Where did you get the data to train them? What are you doing to make sure that it's ethical? How are you mitigating bias?
Yeah, so it's really like having those open and honest conversations
Exactly.
with those third parties to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, it's not just about checking a box.
Yeah.
It's like actually understanding what's going on.
Right, because they might have like a great AI ethics statement too,
Right.
but if they're not actually doing the work, then it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really about like a deeper level of
Yeah, it's about the trust
trust and
and
understanding.
communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and this kind of brings us back to Roy's point about diverse perspectives.
Right.
Like, it's not just the engineers who need to be in the room. We need, the ethicists,
Legal.
the legal experts, the data scientists, like all these different people.
And the end users.
Right, the end users.
All right.
Because if you just have a bunch of engineers, you might end up with something that's like really technically brilliant,
Yeah.
but like completely misses the mark in terms of like how it's actually going to be used.
It's like designing a car
right.
that's like super fast and efficient,
Yeah.
but it has no brakes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point?
It's cool, but it's not going to work.
So you need all these different people to come together
Absolutely.
to kind of check each other's blind spots.
Yeah.
I like that it's like a team effort.
It is a team effort for sure.
And this isn't just about like building AI responsibly within a company. It's also about building trust with like the public.
Absolutely.
Right? Because we hear all these stories about like AI gone wrong.
Right.
And people are understandably, I think, a little bit hesitant
Yeah.
about like what this all means.
It's scary for people.
So if companies are being really transparent and showing that they're thinking about these things,
Right.
then maybe we can start to feel a little bit more comfortable.
Exactly. And it's not just transparency. It's accountability too.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to take responsibility if things go wrong.
Right, because they probably will at some point.
Oh, they will. Yeah.
It's inevitable.
It's technology, things break.
Things break.
So it's more about like, how do we deal with that?
when it happens.
Yeah. How do we respond?
And I think, as we're talking about this, it strikes me that it's not just about like big companies, right? Like this is stuff that we as individuals need to be thinking about too.
Absolutely. We're all impacted by AI.
Yeah, like think about, the algorithms that are like shaping our social media feeds
Yeah.
or recommending products to us or, even facial recognition
Copy that,
technology.
right.
Like this stuff is everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to just kind of like let it wash over us.
Yeah, just accept it.
But we should be thinking critically about like, how is this affecting me?
Right? How is it using my data?
Yeah.
What data is it collecting?
And one of the articles that you sent me mentioned data literacy.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like,
Yeah.
what does that even mean?
So data literacy is basically being able to understand and work with data.
Okay.
So it's being able to read it, interpret it, analyze it, and communicate about data.
So kind of like being able to speak the language of data.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you understand how data works, how it's collected, analyzed, and used or misused,
Right.
then you can understand how AI is making decisions.
Okay, so this is about us being more like informed citizens in a world that's increasingly being shaped by data.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, can you give me like a specific example of like how data literacy might be helpful?
Yeah. Let's say you're using like a health app that's powered by AI.
Okay.
Data literacy would help you interpret that information that that app is giving you
Okay.
and make better decisions about your health.
That makes sense.
Or if you're reading a news article that's citing a study that was done with AI,
Right.
data literacy would help you understand, like, is that a valid study?
Okay, so it's about like not just taking things at face value, but really understanding like
Correctly.
where did this come from?
Yeah. What are they basing these conclusions on?
Yeah, okay, so how do we become more data literate? Like, is this something that, we all need to go back to school for?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There's a lot of resources available online, courses, tutorials, books, articles. Start by being curious about the data you encounter every day.
What do you mean by that?
So, like, next time you see a chart or a graph in a news article, don't just scroll past it.
Yeah,
Take a minute to look at it. What is it showing you?
okay.
What are the units of measurement? Are there any trends or patterns you can see?
So it's like being more mindful and engaged
Yes.
with the data that we're seeing all the time.
Yeah, because we see data everywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think, like you said, we just let it wash over us.
Yeah, it's like background noise almost.
Right.
But it's not.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And I think, as we're talking about all this, it's like AI governance, it's not just this like abstract concept.
Yeah.
It's something that affects all of us
Absolutely.
in very real ways.
It's not just for organizations.
Yeah.
It's for individuals, too.
Okay, well, this has been a really great conversation. I feel like we've covered so much.
We have.
Maybe we can just take a second to like recap the key takeaways from this part.
Yeah, good idea.
So we started by talking about understanding where AI is being used within organizations.
Yeah, and having a map
Yeah, having that map.
of the AI landscape, which sounds really cool, actually.
It is cool.
And then, we talked about how this understanding is so important for, like,
For data privacy.
data privacy, security.
Yeah, especially when you're working with third parties.
Right, because you don't have control over that.
Yeah, you don't know what they're doing.
And then we talked about diverse perspectives and how
Yeah, we need everyone in the room.
it's not just a one-person job.
It's a team effort.
It's a team effort.
Yeah.
And then we talked about this idea of data literacy,
Yeah,
which I think is so important
absolutely.
for all of us as individuals
Mhm.
to start understanding. Yeah, the more we understand data, the more we can understand AI
Yeah.
and how it's impacting our lives.
This is really about like empowering
It
individuals
is.
to be more informed and like take control of
Yeah.
their data and their interactions with AI.
We need to be active participants,
Yeah, not just passive consumers.
not passive, yes.
This has been a really great conversation,
It have.
but we do have more ground to cover,
Yes, we do.
including some like specific steps that individuals and organizations can take.
Yes.
So stay tuned for part 3. I think it's easy to get caught up in like all the scary stuff about AI,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember like it can also be used for good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
AI has the potential to, like, revolutionize so many aspects of our lives.
Right. Like healthcare, education.
Sustainability, social justice, like, you name it.
Yeah, it could really help us solve some of these
Yeah.
big problems that we're facing.
Huge problems. Like, can you imagine, like, AI helping us develop new medical treatments?
Yeah, like that would be amazing.
Or, like, personalized learning
Oh, yeah.
for every student.
I would be so cool.
Yeah.
So it's really about, like, how do we,
Harness that power.
yeah, harness that power for good and make
Yeah.
sure that we're not, like,
Right.
letting it run away from us.
Exactly. We need to create a framework
Yeah.
that allows us to unlock that potential,
Right.
but also safeguard against the harms.
Right. So it's like innovation, yes, but
Yeah.
not at the expense of, like, our humanity.
Exactly. It's all about balance.
Yeah.
And it's a collective effort. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just on governments or tech companies.
Right.
It's on all of us.
Yeah, we all have a role to play
Absolutely.
in making sure that AI is developed ethically.
Yes, we need to be asking questions,
Yeah.
demanding transparency.
Yeah, holding these companies accountable.
Yes.
So it's not about being afraid of AI.
No.
It's about, like, shaping it to
Pittsburgh.
be what we want it to be. Okay, so as we're, wrapping up this deep dive into AI governance,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Yep.
What role do you want to play
Yeah.
in shaping the future of AI?
It's an important question.
Yeah, like, what questions are you going to ask in your workplace?
Right.
How are you going to engage with this topic in your communities?
Exactly, because this isn't just some, like, far-off thing.
Right.
This is happening now
AI is already here.
Yeah.
It's affecting our lives.
in so many ways.
And we need to make sure that we're, like, being thoughtful about it.
Absolutely. We have to be intentional.
Yeah, and that we're, like, using it for good.
Yeah.
And remember, we talked about data literacy.
Yes, data literacy is key.
Like, the more you understand data,
Yep.
the more you're going to understand AI.
Exactly. They're interconnected.
So keep learning.
Yes.
Keep asking those questions.
Keep pushing for a better future.
Yeah, a future where AI is a force for good.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.